morning. It's 7 minutes after 10 on a Friday. That means it's time for the Real Estate Fix with Rich. I'm your host, Rich Szerman, on KHTS 98.1 AM 1220, your hometown station. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it every week. Thank you for giving us the privilege of some of your time. We're going to spend the next hour. We got kind of a special show today. We have my lovely wife, Jane, an attorney extraordinaire, in the booth with us today. She's going to be in through the whole show. We got a lot of response to the show we did, not last week, but the week before, about reverse mortgages. There's some things, we're getting a lot of reverse mortgage issues in my office. Those of you guys who listen regularly know that what I do, in addition to my regular real estate practice, and for about 30 years, what I've been doing, actually a little over 30 years, what I've been doing is free foreclosure defense and fixing people's problems, and there's all sorts of stuff, all pro bono stuff. We do all of this stuff for free. So if you've got a real estate problem, whether it's a mortgage issue or a title issue or an insurance issue or whatever's going on, give us a call. You can reach me at 661, this is my personal cell phone number, 661-714-1400. That number again is 661-714-1400. And for those of you who call, thank you for calling. I'm happy to answer your questions, but you don't have to be surprised that I answer my own phone. I'm thinking of hiring someone to do that, but I'm just not that important. But at least not yet. So I'm working on it. I'm working on getting a staff. Anyway, I'm that for that stuff. But anyway, I love when you guys call, so please, I get calls all days, all morning, noon, and night with real estate questions. If I don't answer, you can always text, and I will call you back. You can leave me a message, I'll call you back, but I'm more than happy to talk to you anytime. I've got over 30 years of experience, and I'm certainly happy to help. So whatever your questions are, bring in me, and we'll get into it for you. So where there's a will, there's a way. There's always a solution to these problems. We just got to, put our heads together and look. But anyway, this week I'm going to keep the market wrap kind of fairly short this week. Because we want to get into the reverse mortgage stuff because it is important, and we're lucky enough to have an attorney in house today. So yay, thank you for coming in. So we want to talk to Jane. We want to get Jane into this as soon as we possibly can. So that's why we're going to start the show that way. So let me just go through some quick market wrap-up stuff. There are three headlines I'm going to read to you. There are three different stories. We're not going to get through the entire stories. I just want to read you the headlines because they are totally emblematic of what is going on. No less a source than the good folks at Reuters are reporting as of yesterday that the U.S. 30-year mortgage rate topped 7% for the first time since last fall. So the mortgage rate is up again, above 7% again. Now, the market is what forced it up. It wasn't about the Fed raising the interest rate, although it will be because the Fed is going to raise the interest rate at least 2 more times before the end of the year. I've been saying that now for the last several months, and everything points to that. So let's talk about this a little bit. The 30-year mortgage rate topped 7% for the first time since last fall. The interest rate on the most popular U.S. home loans leapt back over 7% last week for the first time since last fall as financial markets adjusted to an expectation that the Federal Reserve will need to keep its benchmark rate higher for longer to beat back inflation. The average contract rate on a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage jumped 22 basis points to 7.07% in the week ending July 7th, according to the Mortgage Bankers Association. They also said Wednesday that in their weekly recap that the number of home loan applications activity is down. That's the highest rate increase since November and brings the rate within 10 basis points of last October's 2-decade high. In other words, the rate is as high now, or very close to as high now, as it has ever been in the last over a decade, which we reached earlier this year. Anyway, or last October we reached it. Anyway, according to the MBA, the Mortgage Bankers Association, and by the way, let me just say again, I always take in data from the Mortgage Bankers Association, but please consider your source. The sun is always shining. Everybody should always get a mortgage, and it shouldn't matter how much interest rate you pay on it. Is kind of their attitude, it would seem. So consider your source. But according to them, incoming economic data continues to send mixed signals about the economy, with the overall impact leaving Treasury yields higher last week as markets expect the Federal Reserve will need to hold rates higher for longer to slow inflation. All mortgage rates in their survey followed that suit. Basically what they're saying is rates have gone up, and they're going to keep going up because inflation has not come down enough. See also housing prices. The little bounce that we have, that I have a creative name for, which I won't use, but the bounce that we have is causing, because again, the market is shrinking. We're doing about 40% less business overall. 40% fewer houses are being sold. 40% fewer houses are getting bought. But in the race to kind of deflate the housing market, thanks to the Fed, demand is still winning. It's all based on supply and demand. Almost all economic issues are at their core. And the bottom line is there's still more people out there who want to buy houses than houses that are available. So the inventory is very, very low, and as a result, it's keeping prices high. Now, in other areas of the country, they don't have that. In other areas of the country, they are seeing prices starting to fall, but not here in Southern California because we're a very resilient market because people want to live here. So that's kind of that. So be aware, the interest rate has gone up a little bit. It'll come back down a little bit before it goes up again. The real danger is when the Fed raises the interest rate. That's going to happen, I think, beginning of next month. So we'll see how that goes. But anyway, let's next headline I want to talk about. B of A got caught, and this is gonna We're not talking about B of A specifically today, but we're going to get into reverse mortgages. We're going to talk about PHH a little because they're one of the biggest offenders. But B of A just got caught doing very much the same thing. Bank of America has to pay $250 million for what they're calling double dipping and fake accounts. Basically the same thing Wells Fargo got nailed for. People working at B of A were creating fake accounts for their own clientele, just creating them out of thin air. So they could make their production quotas and things like that and get bonuses inside the bank. So you may not have a credit card at B of A, and then suddenly one day you do, even though you never applied for it, plus the fees that go with it. The other thing they got nailed for is unnecessary fees. They were charging ridiculous fees. The biggest problem with B of A's situation, they had a lot, but the biggest was if you had your account go negative and you go to make a purchase and say the purchase doesn't go through, B of A would charge you for it $35 as a non-sufficient funds fee. The problem is, in the age in which we live, most people don't just send it through once. They'll send it through once, it doesn't go, so most retailers. So they'll send it through a second, third, fourth, fifth time. And internet retailers do this like crazy. Same thing if you have subscriptions. And so what is happening is B of A was charging people $35 every single time. So, let's say you got a Netflix account and you got nothing in your bank account and they go to charge you a monthly fee and they try to charge it, 10 times. Well, that's $350 B of A is going to charge you for that. So it's kind of ridiculous. So B of A is paying over $250 million after regulators concluded the giant lender double dipped on overdraft fees and opened accounts for customers without their consent. Harmed customers will get $100 million, and another $150 million will go to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the Comptroller of the Currency. According to, as a result of these leading industry changes, revenue from these fees has dropped more than 90%. So yeah, when you stop stealing from people, Bank of America, you tend to make less money in that regard. From at least 2012, the bank's employees illegally applied for and enrolled customers in credit card accounts without their knowledge, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, at some point, I would like to stop hearing these stories. I would like to stop reporting on these stories. And if $250 million is not enough to get B of A to behave themselves, then maybe $350 million, maybe $450 million. Maybe Bank of America has to go out of business. Or better yet, maybe the CEO for Bank of America needs to go to jail for theft. The biggest problem I see with all of these corporations and what they do, we're going to talk about this regarding PHH and reverse mortgages here shortly, but they get caught, they pay a small amount of what they've stolen. I think with the PHH thing, it's like 35% with their last settlement that they have to repay, which is ridiculous. So you steal $100 million and you only have to repay $35 million. Good gig. I'll take that bet. And no prison time. We decided corporations are people. And I think that's ridiculous, but we made that decision. The Supreme Court helped us make that decision in this country. If they're people, they can be held responsible. And the idea that a board of directors that allows this kind of thing does not have to suffer any sort of repercussion other than their stock price, if that, is ridiculous. Whoever is responsible at Bank of America who let this happen, and the same is true of Wells Fargo, should be in jail. They should at the very least be facing criminal charges. If you steal my bike and the police catch you, you go to jail for theft. But if you steal my money from the bank that I choose to bank with, well, I guess you just pay a fine and move on. That's completely and utterly ridiculous and needs to change. The fines need to be larger, and the people involved who commit wrongdoing, who commit crimes, need to go to jail. This is absolutely insane that they're provided these protections. Anyway, we'll talk about that a little more later. But the last thing I want to talk about is that property values, according to the good people at Yahoo Finance, property values might fall soon. Now, this particular article I'm not going to read you. It has to do with things you should do if the market's falling. First of all, don't panic. Build your cash reserves and manage your debt. This is all stuff that you don't need me to tell you. It's all pretty common stuff. And if you're able to do those things, you wouldn't have a problem. You probably wouldn't wind up on my desk. But this is just yet another article that's saying that the market is going to head south. So be aware. Housing prices are up in our area because we have more we have more demand than we have supply, and that's keeping prices high, which works for us, but it's not going to last. And when you look at other parts of the country where prices are starting to fall, other parts of the world where prices are starting to fall, and an interest rate that is still continuing to go up, that's not a recipe for real estate success. So again, if you have a house to sell, get in the game now, because I don't think it's going to be as good for you 6 months from now as it is now. And if you're a buyer, you want to get into it because there's specialty programs out there that might not exist for financing 6 months or a year from now. Also, if you're a buyer, it's never a bad idea to get in there, get pre-qualified, and then hang back if that's what you want to do. Take your time if you can, because that's how you're going to get the best deal. So I still think it's a good time for buyers. I still think it's a good time for sellers. I do not think we're looking at a complete meltdown like we had in 2008 and 2009. But it's going to be messy for a while. There are choppy waters ahead. And, with the Fed determined to raise interest rates to kick inflation, and when the Fed talks about knocking down inflation, they're talking about knocking down housing prices. That's one of the biggest components in inflation they're trying to tackle. So be aware. That's what's going on. So usually wait to the break to transition. We're going to do that a little bit differently today because we got so much stuff to get into. I got a slew of questions from clients and people who called about that show. A lot of stuff that we're seeing in my office about reverse mortgages. And the bottom line is that with reverse mortgages, there is a tremendous amount of opportunity for malfeasance. There is a tremendous amount of opportunity for banks to steal. And what banks are doing is they're using ridiculous fees, which is what BBA got nailed for and what PHH and all these guys get nailed for every so often for writing up these ridiculous fees. They use them as a profit center. I mean, BBA is complaining in that article because their profit on stealing from people is down by 90%. We'll all cry a tear out for Bank of America that their theft is now only down to 10% of what it was before. Boo-hoo. And yet their stock price is still fine. They're still making hundreds of billions of dollars a year, so they're fine. I'm just so tired of seeing the ridiculous nonsense from these huge corporations that just completely take advantage of the homeowner and then shrug their shoulders like they didn't do anything wrong, like their dog ate their homework and nobody gets punished. And they should, because until we start punishing, this is going to continue to go on. So let's talk with Jane. First of all, I got before we get into the questions from viewers and all that good stuff, let's go over some basic stuff again. So since we have you in here today, and thank you for coming in again.
Hi.
Always nice to have you in.
No
and for those of you listening, and those of you who know us, you know that Jane does not like doing stuff in public. She likes going to court. Trial's fine, good with all that, but not terribly fond of going on the radio and things of that nature. So I appreciate very much that you came in today. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'm sure the listeners will as well, because in addition to being better looking than I am, you're also smarter than I am, because you're the one with the law degree and the MBA. So I like you to field these questions more than me. But let's talk about it. So let's start here. First of all, just for people who don't know, just a quick basis, what is a reverse mortgage at its most basic?
Well, a reverse mortgage, people like to say it's a way for homeowners to tap equity, although technically it's value of your home. It's for homeowners that are over 62 years of age, for the most part. It's a way for them to get the value of their home, to access it in a way that allows them either to not make payments on a mortgage or to actually receive payments based on the value. To set them up a little bit better financially so that they don't have to sell the home. And it's set up that way so that the government, because it's for homeowners to allow them to stay in their home, is the theory, the government insures the majority of reverse mortgages. And the ones that the government does not insure, you don't want to be any part of.
Yeah. There are three basic types of reverse mortgage. The only one we're really going to talk about are what are called HECMs, home equity conversion mortgages, HECMs as we like to call them, cute little industry term. But what that means is an HECM or HECM is insured by the federal government. They're done through the same guidelines as FHA and loans like that. And when Tom Selleck, the sales line for these, that you hear from Tom Selleck and these guys who go on the TV and tell you how wonderful they are, is have your home start paying you. Use the equity in your home to live on. So rather than selling your house, just use the equity in your home so that you can make your monthly bills and things like that. So that's kind of the idea, is to slowly tap the equity in your home to help pay your bills and get you through retirement and stuff like that. And the reason that the government insures these is because we figured out a long time ago that Social Security is just not going to get the job done for most people. Yeah. I mean, here in the Santa Clarita Valley, our average sales price now is around $800,000, $900,000. The mortgage on that, the average mortgage in the Santa Clarita Valley right now is about $5,000 a month. I don't see Social Security helping you out with that. So you need to, AARP did, I keep talking about this, AARP did a survey about a year ago. They do this every couple of years. Pretty good size survey, too. I think it was about 10,000 people. But what they got back is from 98% of respondents said that they will absolutely need the equity in their home to be able to retire. Without the equity in their home, they're on public assistance. So they need it. That's 98%. I'm wondering about the 2% who doesn't need that. And, God bless those people, but we're not one of those people.
No.
I don't know too many people who are. So most people are absolutely going to need the equity in their house in order to be able to retire. And the idea is, rather than selling your house, or rather than taking out a larger mortgage on your house, which I still think is a better way to do this, a lot of people don't have that option though, you're better off with a reverse mortgage because it gives you X amount of dollars per month.
Yeah, in theory, the problem is people don't usually do the math on it, and I don't believe enough investigation and information is provided to the homeowners, because it may seem like a good idea up front because, sure, why not let the house pay you? But the problem is, and if I understand correctly, one of your clients, in looking at the numbers, they're getting $300 a month.
Yep.
It's costing them $450 a month, taken straight off the top of the equity in their house, because it's added to the loan balance, which means it has to be resolved and paid back when they move out of the house or they pass away. And on top of that, there are other fees, as Rich was talking about, and we mentioned before, these other fees. For example, one of the requirements is that you live in the house as your primary residence. Mm-hmm. And as we talked about before, and we'll get into today, one of the big areas of problem for the homeowners is that you have to generally yearly sign a declaration of occupancy that you still live in it. And oftentimes it's from a company you've never heard of before. It looks like junk mail, and a lot of people simply ignore these. And this one homeowner did that. and has rung up on a house that they get $300 a month from. It's now $8,000 in fees simply because she didn't return this document that they wanted.
I'm going to label those fees illegitimate nonsense fees. That's what I'm going to label them. And they come from a company called PHH, who has been nailed many times before. Oh, God, I loathe these people. And Aqua, their parent company, I hate them even more. They're incredibly profitable entities whose job, near as I can tell, is to steal from the elderly and then torture them. That is their business model. And we're going to get into that. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I will say it as long and as loud as I can. PHH and their parent company, Aquin, steal from the elderly, and then they torture them. And if PHH or Aquin wants to file suit about that, you told me many times that the truth is a defense against slander, so go ahead. I absolutely stand by both of those comments, and I can demonstrate both repeatedly. We've been seeing this nonsense in my office over and over again with problems with reverse mortgages, and that's why I'm angry about it. Because stealing from anybody is egregious. Stealing from people who are in their 80s, or in the case of this client, she's 90 years old and lives in Canyon Country, is particularly egregious. It's just wrong every way you look at it. The biggest problem with reverse mortgages in general is the cost to get them is extraordinarily high, and the cost to maintain them is extraordinarily high, and the pitfalls for them are ridiculous. So, I mean, what is it? According to the Mortgage Bankers Association, they fully expect 10% of every single reverse mortgage at some time during its life to be in foreclosure. 1 out of every 10. 10% of every single one is going to be in foreclosure. That is roughly 3 times the amount of foreclosure activity as you would see in a regular standard mortgage. Standard mortgage is about 3% is the average. In 2008, the number of defaults, number of foreclosures got to 9.8%, and it damn near ground the world economy to a stop. But yet, in reverse mortgages, 10% is considered normal.
Yeah.
And this is why. So we're going to go to break. We're going to hear from some of our sponsors and things like that. Also, before we head out to break, I want to thank one of our sponsors, Sam Chong with the Mortgage Hub, sponsor of the show, friend of the show. He's terrific. We love Sam. If you have mortgage issues, go to Sam. But his number's on our website, and stuff you can ask me. But I tell you, let's go to break. Let's hear from some of the other sponsors. We'll see what they have to say. I'll listen to their stuff, pay some bills. When we come back, we're going to get a little bit deeper into the evils of PHH and reverse mortgages, and hopefully warn you guys so you know how to deal with this stuff. I'm Rich Szerman. This is the Real Estate Fix with Rich on KHTS 98.1 AM 1220, your hometown station. See you. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening through the break. Thank you for listening to the show. I'm your host, Rich Szerman. This is the Fix with Rich, the Real Estate Fix with Rich, I suppose we should call it, on KHTS, FM 98.1, AM 1220, your hometown station. We are 27 minutes past the hour, and thank you guys for tuning in. We've got my lovely wife and attorney extraordinaire, real estate attorney extraordinaire, I guess we say. Jane Szerman is in with us. We're talking about reverse mortgages and kind of the pitfalls thereof, because we've gotten a lot of first of all, we're seeing a lot of these in my office, where there's problems after problem after problem. And we've uncovered what can only be described as quite the little scam that the banks are running. It's a very, very profitable scam for them. We're going to talk about that at length right now. So let's get into reverse mortgages. Before the break, we were talking about what a reverse mortgage is. That's where it gets the house to basically pay you. So the idea is that you can use it through retirement. You have to be over 62 years of age. You have to occupy the home, et cetera, et cetera. You can typically borrow up to about 60%. If it goes over that, it gets a little crazy. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But we're going to get through all this stuff before we're done. Now, I want to start with, before we get into the questions, one thing I want to start with. I was the good people at the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And for those of you who don't know, the CFPB is to credit cards and mortgages and student loans what the SEC is to stocks. They are the cop on the block. Now, unfortunately, one of the two political parties in this country really wants to put an end to the CFPB, and so they every time they start to get their feet underneath them, they do something else. They try to defund them. They try to do all sorts of stuff. You've got to sort of ask yourself why you would want to defund an agency whose only job it is to protect consumers, but that's a topic for another show. But according to the nice people at the CFPB, there are 3 responsibilities of a reverse mortgage. That they shout this loud and clear. These are the 3 responsibilities if you have a reverse mortgage that you must live up to. And people, like we talked about, they do not do the math. They do not get prepped. They just hear they can do it. They hear how much money they're going to get out of it, and they just don't think about it. And a part of that, and I don't want to sound ageist here, although I suppose I will because we're talking about reverse mortgages, you have to be at least 62 years of age to get a reverse mortgage. And the older you are when you get it, the more you can typically get out of it. So we get clients all the time who got their reverse mortgage at 82, and they're 86 now. And God bless them, because a lot of them are smarter than I am and a lot sharper than I am, but not all. And most people who are of that age, they're not necessarily paying as much attention as they would have in their 30s and 40s. In other words, it's a vulnerable population that the banks can easily exploit.
And by definition, they're going to get older and be less aware.
It gets worse. That's right. So here are the 3 responsibilities that are very important. And I'm going to go over these with you guys, and you'll understand why in a minute. Number 1, Property charges, property taxes, and insurance. You have to pay your property taxes and insurance on a reverse mortgage. If you don't, they will throw you into foreclosure. Now, you can get them impounded as part of the deal. Almost no one does that, though. So you have to pay your property taxes and your insurance. That's number one. Number two, you have to keep the home in good repair. Now, I don't know how they, quantify that. I've never heard anybody get in trouble for it not being a good repair, but it is a requirement. And number three, and this is also a huge one, the home must be your principal residence.
Yeah.
Those are the three biggies, and you need to stick with those all the time. Now, try to keep those three things in mind as we go through the rest of this. You have to pay your property taxes, your insurance, also HOA. You have to keep the home in good repair, and it has to be your principal residence. So keep those three things in mind. Those are the three biggest bugaboos when it comes to having a reverse mortgage. So, why don't we've got some questions. We've got some questions. We've got all sorts of stuff. So why don't I ask you these questions? We'll field some of these questions, and then we'll talk about this one particular file we've got going on and the evils of PHH, because I loathe these people. Anyway, first question we got. Can a family member take over a reverse mortgage?
Short answer is no. It's specific to the borrowers, so it's either an individual borrower or them and their spouse. So sometimes it's two borrowers, depending on their age. Although for them both to be borrowers, they both have to be over 62. So it depends on the age difference as to sometimes there's a spouse who's not a borrower, and they actually used to be left completely out in the cold when something happened to the borrower spouse. That has improved in recent years, I will say, so that they have some protections and can stay in the property, but it's definitely something you want to look into and be aware of.
Well, one of the biggest changes you're referring to, one of the biggest changes in the reverse mortgage market a few years ago was that what it used to be, if it was a husband or wife owned a house, and let's say just the husband was on the reverse mortgage. If the husband passes away, wife had to leave the house.
Yeah.
And with all due respect to Tom Selleck, who I love as an actor, but I have no interest in taking financial advice from him, I'll just ask the question flat out. Can someone with a reverse mortgage be thrown out of their house?
Absolutely. And unfortunately, it happens a lot.
According to Tom Selleck, that can't possibly happen.
Yeah, that's not actually the case. Sometimes it's people don't know and they don't pay their taxes or they don't sign the declaration of occupancy. And that in and of itself, simply living in the property and obeying all of the rules, simply not signing that document and sending it back to them, or frankly signing it and they lose it.
Also happened, yeah.
Is a complete and total basis for them to foreclose on the house and kick you out.
So strictly speaking, to the letter of the law, they're not, with all due respect to Tom Selleck, they're not, I don't know, he's not the only one who advertises these, he's just the most popular. They say you can't be kicked out of the house, but that is blatantly untrue. Yeah. There are these little tiny little super, what would you call them, administrative things. I call them ticky-tack nonsense, but these administrative things can get you thrown out of your house. Yeah. So yes, you can absolutely be thrown out of your house. Let's move on to another question. Do I pay mortgage insurance on a reverse mortgage?
There's a lot of mortgage insurance on a reverse mortgage.
Yes,
it's quite steep up front. It's one of the many expenses that people aren't aware of that are much higher than a typical mortgage. That's where if you're comparing them, if you can do a regular mortgage and a reverse mortgage, it is pretty much 100% of the time a regular mortgage is going to be more cost effective.
Oh, for sure.
But people are not always in the position to do that, so they look at the reverse mortgage.
The average for doing like a home equity line of credit to pull money out of your house versus doing a reverse mortgage, the cost for a home equity line is typically about 30% of the cost. That's just the acquisition cost. That's not even the monthly cost going on. But just the acquisition of the mortgage, the acquisition costs on a standard home equity line is about a third of what it is on reverse mortgages.
Yeah.
So you still have to go. It's a little bit different qualifications, obviously, because you're using essentially just the house to qualify with a reverse mortgage. You don't need an income, whereas with a home equity line you do. But you are far better off with a home equity line than you are with a reverse mortgage, in my opinion.
Although I should point out there is some qualification required to the extent you have to pay taxes and insurance.
Thank you. Yeah.
It is not nearly on the level, obviously, that you have to make the payments on a mortgage, but you do still have to make enough money to keep up the house in the bank's view.
Well, and also, just to, before we move on to the next question, when you have mortgage insurance, the purpose there is if you don't pay your bill, mortgage insurance steps in and pays off the bank. They don't pay you off, they pay off the bank.
Right.
So from the bank's point of view, reverse mortgage is heads I win, tails you lose. The bank is going to get their money back no matter what. If your house burns to the ground and is now only worth 10 cents and you owe millions of dollars against the house, the federal government is going to step in and pay that.
Yeah, and in fact, they actually come out a lot better in the case of a house that's upside down, meaning it more is owed on it than it's worth, which at the rate the fees pile up monthly on reverse mortgages is not that uncommon, because the banks get paid off entirely by the insurance. So they actually make out better on a reverse mortgage than a regular mortgage situation.
And to add insult to injury, the homeowner pays the premium for that insurance.
Yeah.
Now, that's industry standard. You pay that on a regular loan, too. But the difference is, we were talking about this morning, if you have a home equity line, I don't want to get too fanatic about this, just to give you some numbers. If you have a reverse mortgage, and you're less than 60% loan to value, in other words, the amount of the maximum amount you can take out of the house by the time it maxes out for you, you have PMI that's what, I think less than a third. I think it's
0.5%.
Yeah, it's half a percent. But if it's over 60%, it's 2.5%. So think about that. If you're at 60% or lower loan to value ratio, your mortgage insurance is going to cost you half a point. It's not too bad. It's okay. It's a little higher than normal, but okay.
That's not too bad.
But if you're 61% or 60.1% or higher, you're going to pay 2.5 points. If that's a $500,000 mortgage, that's what points $7,500. No, sorry, $12,000.
Yeah.
Because a point is $5,000, so yeah, it'd be $12,500. $12,500 to insure their investment.
And that's just to originate the loan. That's not the monthly servicing fees or the interest.
And let's also remember, this is an investment. The bank is investing in your house where you have a ton of equity, or they wouldn't have invested to begin with.
Yeah.
Because you can't get a home equity. I keep saying home equity. You can't get a reverse mortgage if you have like an 80% loan to value ratio. If you only have 20% equity, they're not going to touch you.
Right.
Not going to happen. They won't usually touch you in California if you have more than 70%, even 60%, depending on what the rest of the market's doing.
Yeah.
So it gets real expensive real fast. So this is what we're talking about. And it's crazy because you might have applied and thought you'd have, well, I'll just be under 60%. I'll pay half a point if you're paying that much attention. But the appraisal comes back and it turns out that you're at 61%. Well, guess what? Your cost just went up by 5 times on that one component alone. Okay. You touched on this a little bit. This is a question we've been getting a lot since I talked about it last week. We talked about it 2 weeks ago. What is an occupancy certificate?
Well, that's the declaration the homeowner is required to sign that says that they live in the property. And now the good news there is you are allowed to live other places as well. The actual requirement is 6 months and 1 day out of the year, but that's a separate matter. You still need to live in the property, and more importantly to the bank, apparently you need to sign that piece of paper and send it back to them. And then apparently they don't do any follow-up. They unfortunately, they won't call, they don't come by the house, and yet can run up thousands and thousands of dollars in additional fees.
Foreclosure
also
fees.
Profit center for the bank, which I find abhorrent that you can do that and put somebody in that situation when it's literally a matter of just the paperwork.
Also, just keep in mind, just so you guys know, the law on the subject does not require anyone to sign any kind of certificate at all. The banks put out these occupant certificates. The law just says you have to live in the house. It does not say you have to provide a certificate or anything. The law just says you have to live in the house.
All it is, as far as I'm concerned, all it is required is that it's your principal residence.
Yeah, that's it.
That is nothing more than an opportunity for the bank to run up the fees, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Okay, we'll move on to the next question. Do I have to, well, we talked about this a little bit. These are 2 questions, are kind of one. We'll combine them. First question was, do I have to pay property taxes? Second question is, do I have to pay hazard and flood insurance?
Yeah, and that is a different type of insurance completely. The mortgage insurance pays off the bank in the event your mortgage is not covered. Yeah. But that's just insurance.
That's if your house burns insurance down, your house gets flooded away, that kind of stuff.
Right. So you got to pay the insurance and you got to pay the taxes.
And the bank doing the loan will require that you keep those. And those are the things that people get in trouble for because they don't realize they have a separate payment or they think they made the payment. PHH is also famous for giving forced place insurance, where if you don't put insurance on your house, they come up with their own and charge a ridiculous amount.
Super expensive. We
can talk about that some other show, but there's it allows a lot of opportunity for malfeasance. And when you have these corporations that are completely untrustworthy and have an unbelievable record of bad acts, you got a problem. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So yeah, the answer to both of those is absolutely. Next question, can I ask my bank for an accounting?
Yeah,
yes.
You can always ask your bank for an accounting and should. Now, the problem is, and you've run into this, a lot of banks, and particularly the reverse mortgage banks, it seems, because they don't like to be very transparent about their costs, they will give you a sheet with codes on it and amounts next to it, and none of it makes any sense. Or it'll just say service fee.
If it says anything.
Yes.
Yeah, no, we've got a couple of clients right now, one with Carrington, which you guys have heard me complain about before, and another with PHH, which we're going to talk about third segment today. What they do intentionally, if I call PHH for a client who's got a standard mortgage with them, or with Ocwen, their parent company, and I demand the accounting, which, by the way, the law says they have to provide within 30 days of a qualified written request. So we request these all the time, because we always got to see the accounting to fix the problem. So PHH on a standard mortgage will send me a standard accounting, and it'll have every penny accounted for, and it will be labeled as to what it's for. No codes required. If you do this for a reverse mortgage, they will give you nothing but codes. And unless you know what code 306 or 307 or 95 mean to PHH Mortgage, you have no clue what they're charging for. Now, I do this all day, every day. We've been doing this for over 30 years, so I'm used to these sorts of things. When I get these from clients, I go, well, wait a minute. I don't know what code 95 is. I can guess because I'm looking at the amount, so I have a pretty good guess, but you got to tell me. Now, in both of these cases, we had to fight like crazy to get them to give up their codes. They gave us a map and didn't give us the key. So we absolutely had to yell, scream, kick feet. You wrote a letter, I think, threatening to sue them if they don't produce the codes, because under the RESPA guidelines, Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, and under the Fair Debt Collections Act, they have no choice. Producing the accounting means they have to do it in a manner that can be understood. But yet with reverse mortgages, unlike their other mortgage products, keep in mind when I say that, unlike their other mortgage products, they are intentionally vague, they are intentionally hard to understand, and they are designed to be given to somebody who is elderly, so they go, I don't know what this means. I'll ask I'll ask a family member, and they'll look at it and go, Grandma, I don't know what the heck this means. And then the issue will just move away and they'll go on with their lives, because they know if they obfuscate the amount that they've stolen, they can steal easier. If you are the invisible man, it's very easy to steal. If people can see you, it's much more complicated.
I'll point out something related to what we were just talking about before with the taxes. There are situations where the bank, I don't know the percentage, but they will pay the taxes if you are delinquent. So if you as the homeowner don't realize you have to pay the taxes, right. They really wouldn't have any reason not to. So they pay the taxes to get it current. And then I've seen some homeowners who think, okay, well, they've paid it. That's just going into my loan.
For sure.
And don't realize that has to be handled separately. They might see it as an item and, it's just rolled into the total. That's fine. But that becomes a very big problem for them. And then, of course, by the time they realize that, attorney's fees, you've got thousands and thousands of foreclosure fees on top of that. Yeah.
The banks will always pay the property taxes, not another type, but property taxes, because property taxes always get collected. And the penalties are extraordinarily high, and they don't want the government's...
Because they have to cover it regardless.
Well, yeah, they don't want the county's property tax fee, charges to cut into their profit margin.
Yeah.
They don't like, only they get to steal from consumers. They don't like it if somebody else crowds their turf. So they always pay the taxes, and then what they turn around is they pay the taxes, the property taxes, then they charge an outrageous amount for paying the property taxes, then they put the client, this is a reverse mortgage, then they put them into foreclosure because the property taxes weren't paid, and they charge even more nonsense fees on top of that because now they're in foreclosure on top of everything else.
They're triple dipping for something they've intentionally set up to be hard to understand.
And this is the way we play our game. So let's move on to another client, because we're going to circle back around to PHH. I want to get into this particular file in particular, but something like that. Anyway, can I use a reverse mortgage to buy a home? Yeah.
Yeah, it's less common, but you certainly can.
Yeah, we've had clients, just this year we've had a couple of clients who've they've sold house A and then used a reverse mortgage because they're putting a lot of money down to buy house B. Now, that is a fairly complicated way to do it. It's very rare that it's going to make sense for someone to do it. In this case, it did, because he was going to get a reverse mortgage anyway, and it just made sense to do it this way.
Yeah.
And he knows what he's doing. He runs a business, so it was a lot easier, and he had it down to the penny, so it was very comfortable doing that in his case.
Well, that's the key, is getting the information on it. It does make sense sometimes for some people, but it's about getting the information and the knowledge and to be able to compare it and understand it.
Okay. Two more questions and we'll go to break. Okay, let's see. Next one. Should I use a reverse mortgage to consolidate debt?
Pretty much
no.
No.
I have a much longer explanation. I've been reading about this the last week because I wanted to make sure I was right when I was talking about this to you guys. I'm just going to save you a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of research time. No, you should not use a reverse mortgage to consolidate debt. Absolutely not. Because first of all, what you're doing is you're taking unsecured debt and you're making it secured debt.
Yeah.
So if MasterCard sues you because you're not paying them, you can always, worst case, you could file a bankruptcy. You could enter into a settlement, all kinds of stuff. They get their claws into your house. You got to find a new place to live. So no, you should never ever use a reverse mortgage, in my opinion, to consolidate debt.
And that's what a lot of people, I think, aren't considering, is when people take out a reverse mortgage, they often are thinking, well, the heck with it, it's my equity and it's my house and I need it to live on, and that's perfectly reasonable. Except they're not thinking about the fact that the more the debt rolls up, what about the circumstance where you don't die in the house? What about you need to go to assisted living or you need to go to live with family? that throws a complete monkey wrench into things.
You are so prescient and smart. The last question is, and she didn't know this. She got a peek of the first couple of questions because she snuck a look at my file yesterday, but she didn't know this one. Last question: what happens if I have to move out of my? And by the way, this is one of the most popular questions according to the AARP website. What happens if I have to move out of my home to a nursing facility or move in with family if I have a reverse mortgage?
The reverse mortgage has to be satisfied.
Yeah,
you have to sell the house. It's and it actually can be short sold as well to somebody.
Sure.
Now under those circumstances, actually, if a house is underwater and there's more owed on it than the house is worth, family members, somebody can get a mortgage. They can't get a reverse mortgage unless they qualify individually for a reverse mortgage, but they can get a mortgage and purchase the property for 95% of the appraised value.
So in other words, if you let's say you got a reverse mortgage and you owe $1 million on the reverse mortgage, and the house is only worth $800,000. Well, the nephew or somebody can buy the house when grandma moves out. They could buy the house for 95% of that $800,000, and the rest of the debt will just be forgiven.
Yeah.
And they'll have to buy it, but they'll have to get their own financing. Buy the house like any other purchase. So there are benefits to reverse mortgages. I don't want to say they're all bad because there's sometimes you can use them and they're a very, very good financial vehicle. They're just they should not be as prevalent as they are.
Well, I think that's
they get overused.
And that is part of the problem is if you continue to need income or a place to live after you're not in the house. If you do need to move in with family, that becomes, the house has to be sold then anyway, and so you can't keep it. It's no longer an asset of yours, and that's just not an option.
All right, so we answered all the questions. I thank you for that. That was awesome. Hope you guys learned something by listening. I tell you what, let's go to break. Let's hear for some more of our sponsors, because we like to hear from sponsors because they pay for the show, and we like that. And then when we get back, we're going to talk about this one particular file in Canyon Country, 90-year-old lady retired in Canyon Country who's being mercilessly taken advantage of by PHH and didn't really know until she came to see me. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news. So let's go to break. You're listening to The Fix with Rich on KHTS 98.1 AM 1220, your hometown station. See you when we get back. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. You're listening to The Fix with Rich on KHTS 98.1 FM, AM 1220, your hometown station. Thank you guys for listening. We're getting to the favorite part of the show right now because if you weren't listening earlier, if you haven't heard me talk about this in the weeks prior, I have I cannot stand PHH Mortgage. I don't like most of these mortgage companies, but PHH and Carrington in particular, I just loathe because every time I turn around, again, I do this stuff pro bono. We get a lot of mortgage problems in my office, and we're happy to have them, happy to get people sorted out. PHH, as far as the large companies, is by far the hardest company to work with. They take ripping off their own consumers as a business model. That's obviously what it is. Now, don't just take my word for it. I'm going to read you some information about PHH and their parent company, Ocwen Mortgage. First thing you need to know is Ocwen is a giant company. They have, I think they have $260 million just out of the PHH portfolio. They've got about another, something $200 or $300 million in mortgages that they're servicing. Ocwen is they're an absolute mammoth company. So, Ocwen acquired PHH in 2018, but in 2014, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and all 50 states, think about how we can't agree on what day of the week it is or on time zones, but all 50 states brought a lawsuit, all in agreement, against Ocwen, accusing it of misconduct, including charging unfair fees and effectively pushing people into foreclosure. That was 2014. Without admitting wrongdoing, because of course they never do, Ocwen agreed to a settlement of $2 billion in mortgage relief funds plus another $125 million in funds to consumers. That was in 2014. They have not changed their business practices. In fact, they become more profitable, and they were doing it more, from what I see. The CFPB took legal action against Ocwen again in April 2017, accusing the company of inaccurate record keeping and, guess what? Overcharging consumers that lead to foreclosures. Ocwen, of course, said these things are unsubstantiated, but a judge in 2021, think about those dates, 2017 to 2021, interesting how slow our legal system moves, found that many of the claims are already covered in a 2014 settlement, but other claims in the 2017 action may still go forward. So they get nailed in 2014. In 2017, they're still doing it. They get nailed again, but it's okay because in 2018, they were allowed to buy PHH Mortgage for $360 million. Now, the combined company assets as of 2018 were $296 billion. So that's a hell of a deal that Ocwen was able to buy PHH for $360 million. 2022, the net income of Ocwen, supposedly their net profit was only $26 million. I have a very hard time believing that because they're a $296 billion company who have over $360 million dollars in mortgages under contract with PHH alone. A lot of those are reverse. PHH says they have 1 million consumers. Ocwen has about 3 times that, so you got about 4 or 5 million consumers they're dealing with. PHH reported revenue of $831.9 million in 2022 alone. So that's just last year, $831.9 million in revenue. In 2017, February to be exact, both Ocwen and PHH received cease and desist orders prohibiting acquisition of new mortgage servicing rights and originating of mortgage loans. In other words, you guys are so bad at this, the government has said you are not allowed to loan anybody money, and you're not allowed to buy loans on the secondary market either because you have to clean up your act. Which, of course, led to the August 2017 $74 million settlement about bad loan allegations because, guess why? Ripping off clients, overcharging. In this case, they were lying to the government about loans that were supposedly FHA and VA when it turns out they didn't meet those requirements. They're overcharging the government. So thank you for stealing our tax dollars as well. We'll jump ahead a bit. February of 2021, a coalition of 33 state attorneys generals filed a motion against PHH Morgan and its predecessor, Ocwen Servicing, alleging charging unlawful servicing fees to nearly 1 million borrowers. There's more in 2021. There's more in 2022. These guys consider getting sued and paying out settlements as just part of their deal. That's just business operating. And this I love because this drives me nuts. PHH recognized by Fannie Mae in 2022 as a star performer because Fannie Mae said they did such a great job.
Well, if I understand correctly, it's not that they did a great job, it's that they did a lot of business.
They originated a lot of mortgages.
Which they feel is the same thing.
I
don't think so.
Now, I would never do such a thing because I'm not a violent person, but I would love to get my hands on the person at Fannie Mae who said, hey, you know what, PHH is doing a spectacular job. We ought to give them an award.
Yep.
Unless it's an award for ripping off your consumers, and I will say it again, stealing from the elderly and then torturing them and threatening them with foreclosure, I don't see PHH winning a whole lot of awards, and Ocwen should get even fewer. I cannot believe that these companies are allowed to exist. And for those of you who are curious, if you want a person to vent your anger at, the CEO of Ocwen is currently a guy named Glenn Messina, Messina. If I had his phone number, I would give it to you. He is in charge of this clown show. Now, for them, it's not a clown show because they make billions of dollars a year. They think it's fantastic.
Very profitable.
It's extremely profitable clown show. What's horrible about it is that they're stealing from other people, and that's where I have a problem. So let's talk about this one particular client, which we've kind of been talking to a little bit. This is a client we have in the office right now. She's one of several that fit this, but hers is particularly acute. She's 90 years old. She got a reverse mortgage. She's getting a lousy $300 a month out of a house in Canyon Country that she owns outright. House is easily worth $600,000, maybe $5,000 if it's damaged. She owes nothing against it except the money on the reverse mortgage. She's up to around $200,000-$300,000 that she owes them now. She is getting $300 a month, and it's costing her $450. So every month that goes by, she increases the debt load on her house by another $450 for the lousy $300 she gets. Last year, she got $36,000 out of her house. $300 a month, $36,000. Sorry, $3,600. I'm off. If you see numbers, I'm off. $3,600. Excuse me, I'm off by a decimal point. So she got $3,600. To get that $3,600 out of her house cost her, what is that, $5,200. That's ridiculous. It is ridiculous to have to pay $150 to get the use of $300 of your own money. So it's a garbage program to begin with. She's paying a ridiculously high interest rate, and she's insuring her own loan. Now, on top of all of that, what happened in her case, her loan was with a company called Guardian, which is, by the way, a subsidiary, I believe, of Ocwen anyway, but it then transferred to PHH. Sorry, Champion, not Guardian, Champion. It then transferred to PHH. And by the way, there's nowhere in the title record where PHH is mentioned. We've gone through all of it. PHH is not mentioned. It went to another company. That company gave it to PHH. They didn't have to file title because it says successors or assignees. They just assigned it to PHH. Mm-hmm. So even if you check the title record, which most 90-year-olds are not going to do, you still couldn't find PHH. She gets a letter in the mail that says, are you still, where it's from PHH. She goes, well, thought it was another. She gets ads all the time. She threw it away. Yep. PHH did no further investigation. Her phone number is publicly listed. They didn't call, they didn't knock on the door, they didn't do anything. They just decided she was in foreclosure. So they made this up on her. They decided she was dead. She didn't tell us she's alive, she must be dead. So because PHH, in their infinite wisdom, doing no other investigation whatsoever, decided that she had passed away, they put the loan into foreclosure. Client didn't know until she got a foreclosure notice. She got that and went, whoa, what's this? She called the good people at Champion and said, what is this going on? They said, we don't know, we don't have your loan. She said, who has my loan? She said, we don't know. They said, we don't know. They gave her the name of some other company that nobody's ever heard of because it's a company that's a holding company that PHH uses, in my view, to obfuscate their actual ownership of the loan. So she had no idea who to even talk to. That's what led her to us. It didn't take us too long to track down PHH. It took us about 2 weeks. And then it's taken us another 3 to 6 weeks roughly to get records out of PHH of the stuff we talked about earlier, the codes and the other nonsense they pull. And what we found so far is they have overcharged her to the tune of $8,000. Now, this is how the scam works. They overcharge for these foreclosure nonsense. They're charging people who don't know any better. And when the house goes to foreclosure, when it needs to be sold, all the family knows is they had a reverse mortgage they had to pay back. That's it.
Yeah.
It's totally and completely unjust. It is completely and totally wrong. It is just evil from where I sit. And they've picked for them it's a great scam because they can rip off people who will not know any better and who will likely be dead by the time by the time they're even found out, if they're ever found out.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. When I have a family who passed away, my concern is not their mortgage.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about this some more. If you have questions about reverse mortgages, please give me a call. My name is Rich Szerman. My wife is Jane Szerman. She'll be happy to help you as well, although we don't give out her number for 24-hour calls. That's me. But you can reach me anytime, 24 hours a day at 661-714-1400. That number again is 661-714-1400. That is my personal cell phone. You can reach me at that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, although I do sleep on occasion, so if I don't answer, please send me a text, and I will call you back. This stuff is nonsense, and it must stop. We're going to be talking about it as time goes on, I promise. We'll get this fixed for her, too. So if you have a real estate problem, you got an issue, please give me a call. My name is Rich Szerman. You're listening to The Real Estate Fix with Rich on KHTS 98.1 AM 1220, your hometown station. Have a